Welcome to the Wise Idea Weekly Podcast with Christopher J. Harris, focusing on life, leadership, family, marriage, and the church. We are providing tools for our inspiration and wisdom for life. Our goal is to inspire everyday people to live wise lives. If you're new to us, we release a brand new podcast weekly on Thursdays. Thank you for tuning in for this week's episode. Here's our host, Christopher J. Harris.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome again to another episode of the Wise Idea Weekly Podcast with Christopher J. Harris. I am your host, Christopher J. Harris. And guys, guess what? Y'all know what I'm about to say, right? I'm so excited. I'm so excited to have you tune in every single week to the Wise Idea Weekly Podcast, where we believe when wisdom becomes a part of your life, your entire life gets better. Yeah, man. Somebody asked me the other day, well, what is wisdom? You know what I told them? Wisdom is God's common sense. I love that. I love that. Wisdom is God's common sense. So when wisdom becomes a part of your life, your entire life gets better. I want to say thank you to everybody that has been tuning in every single week and engaging with the content, engaging with the information, engaging with our guests. It has been such a pleasure and such an honor. I don't take it lightly, nor do I take it for granted that we have a consistent tribe, and it's growing. The audience is growing. Thank you for so many of you all that have become our ambassadors, and that you've been sharing the content, you've been sharing the information on your platforms and engaging with us and even following up with us in so many ways. And so I'm very grateful and thankful for it. Listen, guys, I want to jump right into today's conversation because it is part 2 of our conversation around healthy habits for our lives and all of that. Last week, we talked about how to get on board. We talked about how to get this process started, and particularly from the standpoint that we talked about initially about change being so difficult and hard. And most of us probably already know that. But we talked about why it's hard and why it's difficult. We talked about focus last week. We talked about how to think long term and not just short term. Of course, we don't just want to look at the bad habits, but we also want to look at the good habits and what that looks like. I gave you some book recommendations last week. So if you did not listen to last week's episode, I gave probably maybe 7 or 8 different book recommendations that I think would be important for you to have as a context and as part of the conversation that we're having today. Of course, last week, we also established this reality, and I want this to sink in really good. I'm actually say it and then let it linger in the air for just a minute. And that is this truth. You are responsible for your own life. Let that sink in for a moment. You are responsible for your own life. Things can happen to you that can be out of your control, but in fact, the truth remains that you control how you respond to it. There can be people that say things or do things to you that makes you mad or makes you upset. But at the end of the day, you are the one that is responsible for how you respond and responsible for what happens into your life. It's interesting because we established last week as well that, James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits, seems to suggest to us that all bad habits are because of 2 things: stress and boredom. And most of the time, bad habits are simply a way of dealing with the stress and dealing with the boredom. He says that everything from biting your nails to overspending on a shopping spree to drinking every weekend or even wasting time on the internet can simply be a response to stress and freedom. Man, I had some questions and some feedback last week from that comment. So that was really cool to kind of dig into that. Of course, we defined habits last week. It's a behavior pattern that's acquired by frequent repetition. And we also talked about this whole idea that we really have 2 trains of thought. All of us have 2 trains of thought. One that is thoughtful and conscious and deliberate. The other that is automatic, that makes most of our decisions without even any attention. At Duke University, they did some research about habits. And interestingly enough, that our habits are small decisions that we make. And our habits account for about 40% of all of our behaviors on any given day. So that was really cool. Here, I want to start today's conversation with this, and I want to give you 7 categories of your life where you really want to look at your habits. 7 categories of your life where you really want to look at your habits, where you really want to dig in to the areas of your life where you really need to be intentional about your habits. Number 1 is your spiritual life, That is your faith life. Number 2, your mental life. That is, how are you growing your mind? How are you taking care of your mind? Another way to look at it is, what is the maintenance that you do on your mind? What kind of books do you read? What kind of conversations are you having? Are you intentional with your schedule to make time and space for creativity or for deep thinking? How do you navigate and manage all the information that comes in? It's not just a matter of getting information. It's also a matter of putting the pieces together of that information. It's really about comprehension. Number 3, how do you manage your relationships with your family and your friends? Number 4, social and cultural. How do you manage the relationships with the culture and the community around you? Number 5, how do you navigate and manage your educational and professional life? Number 6, how do you manage your finances? And then number 7, how do you manage your physical health? That is your physical body. Are you working out on a regular basis and all those kinds of things? So those 7 categories provides a framework for the areas that we really need to be looking about. And here is the main idea, or a main idea for today. And that is that in all of those 7 areas, here it is, we want to be intentional. In all of those 7 areas, we want to be intentional. The key to building lasting relationships with that intentionality is focusing on creating a new identity first, right? Your current behaviors are simply a reflection of your current identity. What you do now is a mirror image of the type of person that you believe that you are, right? Not that other people have given you, but that you believe that you are. And this is very important when you think about this notion, because all of this, our identity about who we believe that we are, impacts both the conscious and the subconscious. If you want to get motivated and inspired, then feel free to watch a YouTube video or listen to a favorite song or, do a P90X workout or, listen to a motivational speaker. But don't be surprised if you burn out after a week. Here's the deal. You cannot, when it comes to changing habits, you cannot rely on just being motivated. You have to become the type of person that you want to become. And that starts with proving your new identity to yourself. To change your behavior really for good, you need to start believing new things about yourself. You need to build an identity-based form of habits. Now, imagine how you typically set goals, or how most people typically set goals. And I used to do the same thing. We start by saying something like, well, I want to lose weight, or I want to get stronger. And if you're lucky, you might say, and I say lucky, I don't necessarily believe in luck, but you get the idea. Someone might even say, that's great, but you should be more specific. So then you say, well, I want to lose 20 pounds, or I want to lose 30 pounds, or I want to squat 300 pounds. These goals are centered around outcomes and not identity. Let me say that again. These goals are centered around outcomes and not identity. And so to understand what I mean, consider that there are really 3 levels at which change can occur in your life that helps you develop good habits. So think about them like the layers of an onion. The 3 layers of this onion, number 1 is a change in your outcome. So we talked about, the outcome is I want to lose 20 pounds, or I want to be able to bench press this many pounds, or squat this many pounds, or I want to finish a book or write a book, or I want to stop smoking or just stop drinking, or whatever that outcome is, right? So that's layer number 1, the change in your outcomes. The second layer is the change in your processes, right? Or the change in your systems. Okay. And so I'm going to dig into that a little bit more in just a minute. The third layer is a change in your identity. So we have 3 layers: a change in your outcomes, a change in your processes or your systems, and then a change in your identity. This first layer of a change in your outcomes, or changing your outcomes, this is concerned with changing the results, changing your results. Again, losing weight, publishing a book, winning a championship. And most of the goals that we set are associated with this level of change, just the first level of change. That is the level of changing your outcomes. The level of changing your processes or your systems, layer 2 or the second layer, is concerned with changing the habits or systems, that is implementing things that cause your life to actually change. For example, you want to implement a new routine at the gym. You want to actually get the workouts that you're going to do that's going to help you lose that weight. You've talked to your physician and you know your body type and your body makeup. So you've worked through those kinds of things. Or if you want to be more productive, well, you may need to declutter your desk for a better workflow. Or if you want to win the championship, you've mapped out the steps and the processes, the systems to actually get there, right? Most of the habits that we build are then associated at this level. That is the second level. Now, watch this. The third and the deepest layer is changing your identity. This level or this layer is concerned with changing your beliefs, changing your worldview, changing your self-image, changing your judgments about yourself and about others. Most of the beliefs and the biases and the assumptions that we hold are associated with us at this level. That is the level of our identity. So last week, I talked a little bit about me losing weight in my weight loss journey, and it's been absolutely incredible. I'm really blessed and thankful because in this season of my life, I am the healthiest that I have ever been in my life. Am I the lightest in terms of weight? No, but I am the healthiest. And so when you think about that, my journey actually started with how I saw myself. It started with how I perceived myself. It started with the thought process that, wait a minute, the path that I'm on, the journey that I'm on right now, the habits that I have right now are not sustainable for a healthy lifestyle. So I had to see myself first. I had to see myself different. So we have those three layers: changing my outcomes. Second layer, changing my processes, my systems. Third layer, changing my identity. Now, outcomes are about what you get. Processes are about what you do. Identity is about who you believe you are. When it comes to building habits that last, when it comes to building a system of improvements, the problem is not that one layer or level is better or worse than the other. All layers, all levels of these changes are useful in their own way. The problem then becomes the direction by which the change happens. Now, what are you saying? I am saying that many people begin the process of developing habits by focusing on the what versus focusing on who, their identity, who they are. So the question that I have for you then is, who do you wish to become? Who do you wish to become? And based on the answer to that, that is then going to dictate the what's and the how's. Now, what's most important for you in this moment is to understand the reality that who you are should drive what and how you do what you do. Okay? So first you got to decide, what kind of person do you want to become? What kind of person do you want to become? Decide, how do you want to look? Decide what do you want to be known for? What kind of legacy do you want to have? What kind of influence do you want to have? And these are big questions because we're really dealing with the principles, the values, the morals, the foundation of who we are, and everything else then centers around that, right? Simon Sinek, one of the books that I recommended, talks about starting with your why, right? So here's a few other real examples of how to make this work in real life. So you want to write books, right? The first step should be, do you see yourself as a writer? The first step has to be that you see yourself as an author. Because if you doubt that, if you wonder whether or not you can even put sentences together, or that you understand subject-verb agreement, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, if you doubt that first reality, then you're going to struggle with the other two. So it makes no sense to say, well, you know what? In terms of systems, I'm going to write at this location at this time, right? And so then you sit down to write, and then you end up putting your hands in your face, and you're just sitting there for hours, because the first step really needs to start with this whole identity issue. How do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as an author? That is just one example. Now, as we move to this idea of looking at Our identity, that's the third layer. Second layer is our processes, our systems. The first layer is our outcomes. Once you have that clearly in your mind in terms of how you're processing this, then you have to prove to yourself that, in fact, you have a new identity, you have the right processes, you have the right outcomes, or you can obtain the right outcomes by getting some small wins, right? Prove it to yourself by getting some small wins. What are you saying? I am saying that you cannot boil the ocean. You cannot boil the ocean. If you want to boil something, you have to start with a small pot of water. As you boil or cooking larger things, then you put it in bigger containers, right? So my point is that when you navigate the smaller things, then you can actually then work towards the bigger things. Don't take off or bite off more than you can chew. Start small and work your way there. Create momentum. And as you create momentum, it builds confidence. If you are a sports fan, you know how this works. You already know how this works because you've been watching a football game or a basketball game or a soccer game or a whatever the sport is. And you realize the team is down and doesn't look like they're going to win the game. And sure enough, somebody comes and they hit a home run or a grand slam, or they steal get a stolen base, or they get a touchdown, or they get the first down, or they hit a three-pointer when they're down or whatever. And slowly but surely that momentum starts to build. That confidence starts to build. And so that's the way that life is. Life is about building that momentum. Now, let's shift gears a little bit, guys, and let's talk a little bit about the science of how habits work. The science of how habits work. The process of building a habit then can be divided into about 4 simple steps, right? Now think about this. You have a cue, that's C-U-E. You have a craving. You have a response. And you have a reward. You have a cue, C-U-E. You have a craving. You have a response. And you have a reward. And when we break these things down into their fundamental parts, it helps us to understand not just what a habit is, but how it works and then how to improve it. Because remember what I said last week, and then remember what I said today. We don't want to just focus on the bad habits. We also want to look at the good habits. And I believe that when you look at the good habits, you actually understand better how to deal with the bad habits. So let's break these down. And they are in this order. All habits proceed through these 4 simple steps in the same order. A cue, C-U-E, a craving, a response, and a reward. Now, this 4 simple steps, this pattern, is the backbone of every single habit. It's the backbone of every single habit. And our brains, our minds, run through these steps in the same order every single time. So, first, you have a cue, C-U-E. The cue triggers your brain to initiate a behavior. It is a bit of information that predicts a reward. And it's interesting because our ancestors were paying attention to cues that signaled rewards like food or water or mating with one another. Today, we spend most of our time learning cues that predict secondary rewards like money or fame or power or status, even approval from others or love or friendship. Maybe even a sense of personal satisfaction. Of course, all of these pursuits are indirectly available to improve our odds of survival and reproduction and life and stability. But the deeper motive behind these things ought to be who we are and what we do, which goes back to what we said earlier. Your mind, my mind, our minds is continuously analyzing our internal and external environments for hints of where rewards are located, because the cue, C-U-E, is the first indication that you're close to a reward. Now, that naturally leads into a craving. But before I do that, let me just make sure that you are processing with us. Let me make sure that you are okay with us. So, for example, a cue is when your phone buzzes with a new text message. Just keep that in mind. Your phone buzzes with a new text message. Now, once we have the cue, right, connected to a reward, it naturally leads to the craving. The craving is the second step in this habit loop, or the second stage of the habit loop. and they are the motivational force behind every habit. Without some level of motivational desire, now I talked a little bit about this earlier because I said that motivation is not sustainable for you to change a habit, but you do need some level of motivation or desire. Without craving a change, we have no reason to act. Okay, without craving a change. If you're totally comfortable with the status quo, if you're totally okay with where you are right now, you won't be motivated to change. But you have to want something new or want something different than where you are or what's going on. So what we crave, what we crave is not the habit itself, but the change in state that it delivers. So for example, you do not crave smoking a cigarette. You crave the feeling of relief that it provides, right? You are not motivated by brushing your teeth. You are motivated by feeling the cleanliness of a clean mouth or not having bad breath. You do not want to turn on the television. You want to be entertained, right? So we have to look at this for what it is. Every craving is linked to a desire to change the state of where you are. And this is an important point that we want to dig into. Cravings differ from person to person. In theory, any piece of information that could trigger a craving, but in practice, people are not motivated by the same cues. So for a gambler, for example, that sound of the slot machine, they go to Vegas or wherever, that can be a potent trigger that sparks an intense desire. For someone who rarely gambles, the jiggles and chimes and jingles of the casino is just noise, right? It's just noise. The cues are meaningless unless or until they are interpreted. The thoughts and the feelings and the emotions of the person that is observing is what transform the cue into a craving. So remember I said earlier, I used the example of the cue of the phone. So your phone buzzes with a new text message. The craving then is you want to learn the contents of that message, which now puts me into the next phase, right? Puts me into the next phase. And the next phase then is the response. The next phase then is the response. This is the third stage or the third step, the response. The response is actually the habit that you perform, which can take the form of a thought or an action. Now, whether a response occurs depends upon how motivated you are and how much friction, keep that in mind because we're going to come back to that, is associated with the behavior. If a particular action requires more physical or mental effort than you are willing to expend, guess what, guys? You won't do it. There won't be that kind of response. Your response also depends upon your ability. Now, this may sound simple. It may sound really, really simple. And some of you may actually be lost for a moment, which is why I'm trying to give you the examples as we go through this. A habit can occur only if you are capable of doing it. So if you want to dunk a basketball, but you can't jump high enough to reach the hoop, well, guess what? You're out of gas. You're out of steam. It's not going to happen. So again, back to our example, the cue. Your phone buzzes with a new text message. The craving, you want to learn the contents of the message, okay? The response, you are motivated to do it, right? You're willing to get up off of the couch and go over to where your phone is, and you have the ability to actually go and get your phone. So your response is you grab your phone and read the text. Now, let's move then into the fourth phase of habit development. The response then delivers a reward. The rewards are the end goal or the end game of every single habit. The cue is about noticing the reward. The craving is about wanting the reward. The response is about obtaining the reward. We chase rewards because they serve two purposes, right? They serve two purposes. Number one, they satisfy us. And number two, they teach us. So going back to our example, The cue, your phone buzzes with a new text message. The craving, you want to learn the contents of the message. The response, you grab your phone and read the text. The reward is you satisfy your craving to read the message. You grab your phone, let me say it another way. Grabbing your phone becomes associated with your phone buzzing. So every time your phone buzzes, there's a craving that is now elicited, right? And so some of you may have heard of this concept a little bit under this idea of classical conditioning. It's a psychological phrase, right? Now, the first purpose of the rewards, as I mentioned, is to satisfy us, right? Rewards provide benefits on their own. So food and water, they deliver the energy we need to survive, or getting a promotion brings more money or more influence, in some cases more respect. Getting in shape improves our health, et cetera, extends our life or improves the quality of our life. The more immediate benefits that we experience, the rewards satisfy that craving even more, okay? At least for a moment, rewards deliver contentment and relief from the craving. Now, the second thing that I said to you was that the rewards also teach us. Rewards also teach us. So rewards teach us which actions are worth remembering in the future. Because remember, I said that a majority of what we do every day is based upon our subconscious habits. It's just something that it's the reward, it's the response that we do without even thinking about it. So the reward is teaching our brains, wiring the circuitry of our brains to say that this is something that is worth remembering. Our brain, if you think about it this way, our brain is simply a reward detector. A reward detector. As you go about your life, your sensory nervous system is continuously monitoring which actions satisfy your desires and actually deliver pleasure. Feelings of pleasure and disappointment are part of the feedback mechanism that helps your brain distinguish useful actions from unuseful actions, right? Rewards close the feedback loop and then therefore complete the habit cycle. Therein, ladies and gentlemen, is what you now understand as the 4 stages of habit development. The 4 stages of habit development. Of course, a lot of this research came directly from Charles Duhigg and Nir Eyal in their book, The Power of the Habit. I would also encourage you to also read this book called Hooked, because it'll also give you a lot of content, a lot of understanding behind this, right? So when we think about all this, and I can give you a lot more other examples that we can work through that looks at the cue, the craving, the response, or the reward. Let me give you a few more just to help you get a clear picture of this. All right, so you are answering emails. That's the cue. I hate emails. How about you? Raise your hands if you don't like emails too. I just think sometimes emails can get so overwhelming, right? I think sometimes people use email to communicate things that sometimes they can simply pick up the phone and call. But that's another story. That's another conversation. That's another episode for another time. So the cue, you are answering emails. The craving is you begin to feel stressed and overwhelmed by work. You want to feel in control, the craving. So then what's the response? You bite your nails. You satisfy the reward now. You satisfy your craving to reduce stress. Biting your nails becomes associated with answering email. So just that quickly, in a matter of a week, every time you check your email, now you start biting your nails. Or here's another one, the cue, right? You wake up. The craving is you want to feel alert. The response then is you drink a cup of coffee. You satisfy the response, or the reward now is you satisfy your craving to feel alert. Drinking coffee becomes associated with waking up. Some people have this habit and even confession, I can't function until I get my first cup of coffee. That's nothing but a habit. A cue, you smell a donut shop as you walk down the street near your office. The craving, you begin to crave the donut. The response, you buy a donut and you eat it. The reward, you satisfy your craving to eat a donut. Buying a donut becomes associated with walking down the street near your office. So now every time you walk down that street, you're going to think about that donut. Now, I hope that helps to give some level of picture and insight for you to understand all of this. So where do we go with all of this? Where do we go with all of this? Now that we understand the science of it, we know then how to develop good habits or design good habits and then deal with the bad ones. Now, I made a statement last week, and I know it probably surprised a lot of you guys because you're like, that doesn't make sense. So some of y'all are actually tuned in for the statement that I made at the end of last week's episode. And that is, you don't eliminate bad habits. Really? So what do? You replace them. So as you've heard me talk about, the cue and the craving and the response and the reward, you've heard me talk about this whole notion of identity and developing your why and all of that. Then you have to know that in order to deal with your bad habits, you don't change bad habits. You replace them, right? You replace them with a good habit, right? So sometimes the benefits or the rewards of our habits can feel biological. Sometimes they impact our body. There's certain chemicals that are released. Other times it can be emotional, right? It can be emotional. But here's what I want you to really get in your mind and in your heart. You have to start somewhere. And that somewhere is with the good habits. Now this is going to be bad English, but you'll get the idea. You want to make the good habits gooder. To those that are listening, don't worry. I know how to speak appropriately, but you get the idea, right? And so when I then look at my bad habits, I have to choose a good substitute for a bad habit. Here's the deal. And it's going to sound really simple, but it's so powerful. You need to have a plan ahead of time so it'll dictate how you respond when you face the stress or the boredom that prompts the bad habit. Let me say that again. You need to have a plan ahead of time for how you respond when you face the stress or the boredom that prompts the bad habit. What are you going to do when you get the urge to eat that donut and eat too many of them? For those of you that smoke or drink too much, what are you going to do when you get the urge, right? What are you going to do when Facebook is calling you to procrastinate or to waste your time or to spend time on the internet when you should be working on something else, right? What are you going to do when you should be writing that book, but then you just decide to curl up on the couch and fall asleep? What we have to do is we have to have a plan in place ahead of time, okay? Now, that plan is, what are you going to do instead of your bad habit? Now, what this deals with now is it moves me to a place where I have to cut out as many triggers as possible. So again, if you smoke when you drink, then maybe you don't need to go to a bar anymore. Maybe you need to eliminate all of the drinks out of your house, alcoholic beverages out of your house. If you eat cookies when you are in the house, maybe you need to throw all of them away. If the first thing you do when you sit on the couch is pick up the TV remote, then maybe you need to hide the remote in a closet that makes it really, really inconvenient for you to actually turn the TV on. Make it easier on yourself to break the bad habits or to eliminate and replace the bad habits by avoiding the causes or the things that actually trigger them. So here's a major point for you today. Your environment makes your bad habit easier and your good habits harder. When you change your environment, you can change the outcome. I love that. Your environment makes your bad habits easier and your good habits harder. Change your environment and you can change the outcomes. How often do you try to diet in private? Or how often do you try to quit a bad habit alone? Which moves me to our next step. Oftentimes, in order to change, to eliminate, to replace bad habits, you got to join forces with somebody else that's going in the same direction. Pair it with some people that are going to push you so that you all don't quit together, right? The two of you can hold each other accountable. And then guess what else, guys? You can celebrate your victories together. That's actually a very biblical idea. Surround yourself with people who live the way that you want to live, who have the identity that you have and that you want to have. Don't underestimate the power of finding new friends or refreshing old relationships. Okay. Now, here's the next thing that I want to tell you, and we're getting toward the tail end of this. This has all been amazing stuff today. Use the word but, B-U-T, to overcome negative self-talk. So we spent a lot of time earlier talking about this whole whole idea of identity. One thing about battling your bad habits is that it's so very easy, and I know this firsthand, to judge yourself for not acting better. Raise your hands if you're a perfectionist. Raise your hands if you're a perfectionist. Now, if you're listening to this podcast and you're driving, don't raise your hands, okay? Maybe you can raise one of them. But so many of us are perfectionists. We want everything to be perfect. And that's okay to have a spirit of excellence or have a mindset or attitude of excellence. But don't let the attitude of excellence cause you to be in this space where it's got to be so perfect that you talk yourself out of actually developing the good habits and replacing the bad ones, right? It's so easy to tell yourself how bad you are and what's not going right and the mistakes that you made. So here's how we use the word but to overcome the negative self-talk. Whenever something happens that you self-talk your self-talk is negative, finish the sentence with a but. I'm fat and I'm out of shape, but I could be in shape in a few months from now. Nobody respects me, but I'm working on developing a valuable skill. I feel like a failure, but guess what? Everybody fails sometimes. Do y'all see how I did that? Y'all see what I just did just then? So what you want to do is you want to position yourself. You want to position yourself so that the bad habits get replaced with the good habits. I hope a lot of what I've shared today with you has challenged you to think through this year and to be intentional about your life. When we look at those 7 areas, those 7 components of your life that you should be intentional about, your spiritual life, I hope that you realize that better is before you and that you can go to another level in your life spiritually. I hope that when you look at the mental spaces of your life, I hope that you begin to do some mind maintenance and grow in your mind, that you have margin in your life and time and space to think creatively and to live out your purpose. I hope your relationships with your family and friends become better. I hope your engagement with your community and social issues becomes more wise and becomes more fueling for you. I hope that your educational and professional pursuits become fulfilling. And I hope that you're able to do and to become all that you desire to become professionally and in terms of your credentials and education. I hope that your finances are restorative and not a drain. I hope that your budget is balanced, not in the red, but in the black. And I hope that you're able to have the kinds of resources and money and finances that allows for you to do what you are called and assigned to do. And then I hope the container that you live life in, your physical body, I hope that you're taking care of it. I hope that you have a plan to take care of your health and to not just be haphazard in your living, but to live intentionally with regards to your physical health. And when all of these things happen, then guess what? You'll be well on your way to building the kind of life that improves the quality of your life. Thank you for tuning in today, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk with you through the science of habits and the background behind it and the journey and the things that I've learned along the way. We are all in this together. And for this period of time and for this season, I want to invite you, let's jump in together and let's be intentional to build the kind of habits that improve the quality of our life. Thank you for tuning in. Our announcement is going to come a little bit later on now and share with you some more details about how you can plug in with us and what we have going on. Thank you so much. And y'all know how I end every single week. Listen, when wisdom becomes a part of your life, your entire life gets better. So guess what, guys? Live wisely.
Thanks again for joining us on another episode of the Wise Idea Podcast with Christopher J. Harris. We hope you enjoyed our time together. If you did and would like additional resources and information, you can find the previous episodes, show notes, featured guest information, and more at www.thewise-ideapodcast.com. We also invite you to join the conversation on social media. The Wise Idea Podcast is on Twitter and Facebook. Find us at The Wise Idea and at our Facebook group, The Wise Idea Podcast. On Instagram, find us at The Wise Idea Podcast. Our host is also on social media. You can find him regularly on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Pinterest, all located at CJ Harris 1. Finally, if you enjoyed what you've heard, head over to iTunes and or Google Play and leave a rating and review for other listeners to find us. Our podcast is also on Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Thanks again for joining us. We will see you the next time. Live wisely.